Next we move to the fourth toolbox available for sketching, which is the Constraints toolbox. Constraints can be applied either manually or automatically and control the amount of displacement of entities during sketching and make sure it is defined correctly. So by manual attachment of constraints, we can just choose the required constraint and select the entity to which the constraint is going to be applied. Or we can take the automatic approach where Design Modeler will indicate and suggest the constraint and automatically snap to a location while in sketching mode, and this is the default mode for working within Design Modeler. So there's some examples here based on the constraint types on the left hand side: horizontal constraints, a vertical constraint, point and coincident, which will all restrict changes in the geometry once the constraint has been applied. And these types of constraints can be added and removed as needed in the sketches as we progress through the Design Modeler geometry creation. It's also worth pointing out that you can get to the a global application or enablement or disablement of constraints in the active plane by selecting the options in the toolbar on auto constraints as well. So here's an example of using constraints and also showing the effect of colouring by constraint type, so it's easy to see how and whether a particular geometry sketch has been constrained. So the colouring convention is that teal is under constrained, blue means well defined, black is a fixed constraint, and red is over constrained. There's also another option down here, inconsistent or unknown, as a grey coding option as well. So here we have an example case. We have a circle and we've defined a radius using the dimension options, but we don't know whereabouts in space this circle exists, and as a result it takes on a teal colour because it is under constraint. We can still go ahead and use it for modelling, but as far as the sketching is concerned, there's no definition of where this circle exists in space. So to inform Design Modeler of where it exists in space, we can then assign horizontal and vertical dimensions to it, as shown in the centre image. And once we have the position of the centre of the circle and the radius of the circle defined, that then fully constrains and allows a well-defined sketch, as we can see here, and it changes colour into this navy blue colour to define that to show that it's well defined. Alternatively, what we can do is we can instead of adding the horizontal and vertical dimensions, what we can do is we can change the centre of the circle to a fixed constraint. That then fixes the centre of the circle in space, and together with the radius they offer an alternative method of constraining the position of the circle. So then in this case also the circle takes on the same navy blue colour to show that it's well defined, because the centre of the circle is now in black, which is a fixed position. It's possible that we can over-constrain sketches, and an example of that is applying a radius and a diameter on the same sketch. Obviously it can't conform to both if they're different, so it's only necessary for one of these to be present. So if we have two, it then becomes over-constrained and it reaches a red colour to indicate to the user that it's over-constrained. This is the colouring that it will take on as far as the sketch is concerned, and it will issue a warning to the user here to inform you that it is now over-constrained and you need to view and modify and potentially remove some of the constraints. So if we go to the sketch details view and switch the show constraints to yes, and we can then select the entity and we can list out the constraints in the details view associated with that particular entity, and we can simply go to delete to remove the entities, so that it then becomes so it's then not not over-constrained. We can finally, in the toolbox, we can see the last option under settings, and we have some options for grid spacing, which are on by default. And these are an easy way of creating sketches on the grid so that we can draw and we can snap to existing grid intersection points. So grid and snap will snap to the existing intersection points to allow for easy sketching. And we can also snap per minor as well to allow snapping to points between the main minor grid lines as shown on the bottom right hand side of the screen here.